Hello and welcome to Art Salon. I'm Ellie Shore, and art salons have been a labor of love for me for over 10 years now, and it just gets better and better as time goes on. And our speaker tonight is Renee Phillips. She is a Palm Beach County artist. She grew up in South Florida and also in Colorado, and has been very much raised in nature and in science. And I think the two come together in very interesting and unusual ways in her work. Her work is basically abstract art and poured paint and color. But what she does with it is unique and sometimes sculptural. And I think that's a fascinating idea. Recently, she has begun to experiment with NFTs and has learned a great deal. So with all of that, it's my pleasure to introduce Renee Phillips.
Thank you, Ellie. And thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Renee Phillips. I'm here in my art studio at the Arts Warehouse in Delray Beach. And let's see, I'm going to share my screen. So, yes, as Ellie said, my name is Renee Phillips, and I'm a process and color-based artist. I'm really inspired by macro and micro visions of Earth's surface. And I've been studying color and the textural effects of color for the past decade. It's been a lot of experimentation in the studio, a lot of meditative watching of paint dry for hours. And I'm going to take you through some of the experiments, a lot of the process-based work I do, and how I'm using color as a raw material to really sculpt and create these sensory-filled compositions of paint. There's some constants that have always been with me. I'm now on my 12th year as a professional artist, and I seem to always rely on a few things. The first is experimentation, mostly with alchemical techniques. I did go to art school at the University of Miami, but was not totally inspired after school. What really inspired me was experimenting on my own, kind of turning the studio into a science lab. What gets me back to the studio every day is really the process, because it's all about the process for me. Almost the final result doesn't matter as much as how the artwork is created. A lot of that is because of the physical engagement I have with my body. I take in the natural world, the colors, the compositions through the visual lens and through the energy of a place, but then it really kind of channels through my body, and I use my body as a conduit for creating a lot of these large-scale artworks that you see. And also community. I love people. I'm very engaged with dialoguing with other artists, having conversations like this, getting myself uncomfortable at times, talking about art, working with other artists and collaborating. I think one of the coolest things that I've realized about delving into the NFT field is collaboration. I had never really collaborated with another artist before. So expanding my community through these new technology tools has been a really fun and eye-opening experience, and something I was not expecting out of it. Like Ellie said, I'm a native Floridian. I was born in Boynton Beach, Florida. My dad's a veterinarian, and he's also from Colorado. So at a very young age, he had me sitting on rocks in Colorado and taking in all the senses. He would say, listen to the sounds, feel the breeze, what do you see? So he really almost trained me to have a full sensory experience from a very young age. And I was always an artist. I was always painting. My parents took me everywhere, and I would just color all day long. So I did go to art school. I went and got my Bachelor in Fine Arts from the University of Miami, Florida, and continued on my education. But I wasn't fully inspired by art school, only because I really didn't have any original thoughts in art school. I think I needed some life experience. So after school, I moved up to New York and I worked for Wired magazine. It was a great experience working for Wired. We were underdogs. It was 2003. Technology wasn't that cool. And it was really about art, culture, and business through the lens of technology. So I would get these little doses of art and how technology was starting to make its way into art throughout my time there, which was 7 years. But it was a very stressful job, and I got burnt out. So when I was 30, my husband and I quit our jobs, and we traveled around the world for a year. And this was kind of the great reset of my brain. I could barely put a sentence together while we were traveling because my brain was actually shutting down and rebooting. During this rebooting process, it was taking in all of these new smells, sights, sounds, tastes. And so I had this kind of like full, experience of new things that eventually finally inspired me. So this was the inspiration I needed to build an authentic toolkit of like what I wanted to do in art. When I came back from my travels, I landed back in Florida and found myself wandering into the Boca Museum of Art School, which is where I took classes as a young child during the summer. And I met a mentor. Her name was Edie Lampasona, and she was teaching me things I didn't learn in art school, which was all these like crazy techniques with alcohol and ink and spray paint and collage and gels and mediums and burning paper. And it was so much fun. And I didn't have anything to lose. I thought maybe I would go back to working in the magazine industry. I was kind of just like getting my stuff back together. And I started creating art for the first time that was like authentically me and very original and loving these alchemical techniques. So I said, let me try and make a business out of this. I come from the business world. I used to be in sales at a magazine. Let me try and make a business out of some of these things I'm doing. So I started making sea creatures with these alchemical techniques of collage, photography, layering and all these mixed media techniques. And I literally went door to door to a lot of these interior design stores in South Florida selling my art. And they started consigning them and buying them. And soon I had a thriving business of selling sea creatures, which was super exciting. So I said, I can make a business out of this art thing. But shortly thereafter, we decided to move back to New York City. And the sea creatures, I made an online shop. I was selling online, which was fairly new. A lot of artists weren't selling online back then, which was going well as well. So I also got to do that up in New York. But ultimately in New York, the sea creatures weren't flying, and it was very hard to maintain all of the relationships in South Florida, consigning through all these different interior design places. So I started delving into abstract art, using the alchemical techniques that I had learned with Edie and expanding upon them. And I basically said to myself, I got a part-time job, and I said, I'm just going to hone in on experimenting for the next few years. I'm not going to show my art. I don't really plan on me hitting my stride for a while because I really did want to come up with an authentic lane for myself. A lot of what I did in art school was copying other artists, and I did not want to do that. So I had my part-time job, and then I would just go to the studio every single day and just experiment. I started pouring thick latex paint just because it was kind of what I had around in the studio. And I realized that after a pretty stressful time in New York, it was very chaotic. I said, I'm just going to study one color of latex paint. And I basically watched paint dry all day long and started tilting it and manipulating it with a fan and gravity, and realized that I could get textural effects out of the latex paint, which was super exciting. So I said, okay, let me go down this lane and see what happens. So I started studying color on a daily basis and trying a new color a day and realizing that every color did something different. So this kind of took me down my path of studying color and the textural effects of each color. I was still incorporating some collage elements into my art and just, experimenting. My studio was in Chelsea. It was on 26th Street. So we had these great things called open studios. I did not open my studio for those first 3 years, but I did slowly start to open my studio and gain traction, and people started to take notice of some of my my larger works. This was my Controlled Chaos series, which was really a lot of the alchemical techniques that I had learned in Florida, the layering of collage with latex, with spray paint, gesso, and acrylic. They were very expressive, very fun, and some works on paper that I did as well. Again, I was very interested in the layers of Earth and kind of how man is affecting the current layer of Earth and the Anthropocene era that we're in, of all this plastic that we're creating on the next Earth layer. So I would incorporate a lot of that. So this is my last studio in New York. I'm going to show you this short film. This is kind of when I hit my stride on the alchemy of color and studying color, researching a lot of aerial imagery of Earth's surface and incorporating those two loves of Earth's surface and the alchemy of materials into my practice in my New York City studio. So let's see here.
It always starts with visions of colors. And that's colors I can see in the natural world. This piece was inspired by aerial shots of Earth and how man is manipulating Earth's surface and how that's constantly changing the way Earth's surface looked. I'm a lover of color. I love studying how each color has something to say. I am Renee Phillips. I'm a color alchemist. I'm a daughter of a scientist. He always had me working at a microscope, and my dad is from Colorado, so we would go into the woods and he would have me sit on a rock and listen to the sounds, feel the breeze, and just concentrate on my natural surroundings. So from a very young age, I was taking in the environment from a level of all the senses, which has really impacted the way I create art. Creating art in New York City is very interesting because it's a constant interplay between man and nature. Nature is constantly trying to take over. It's growing mold, dirt is covering up the wild posters on the street and the buildings, and then man is painting over it, and it's this constant fight between man and nature that you see in New York City. So that was really inspirational to me. Also a reaction to living in New York City. It's completely chaotic. When I got into the studio, all that energy would be put onto the canvas, but I was always trying to control it. And it was a lot of energy, it was a lot of action. I was always trying to control the chaos of my life and the art. From there came the meditation series, which was my need in New York City to really dial it down and turn inwards. And that's when I really started to focus on just studying color. So I started to put just one color on canvas. From there, that's when I realized that every color did something different. Every color, just like humans, it has different characteristics when put under the manipulation of environmental factors. In order to learn the color, I had to do small little studies, and those studies are called meditation studies, because I would just sit there and watch color and paint dry for hours and hours and hours until it was time to manipulate it. Some colors take 2 hours to dry and some colors take 12 hours to dry, and I didn't know that until I watched paint dry for that long. And that's why it's called the meditation series. Years of experimenting in the studio, doing things that art school told me not to do, you know, mixing oil with water. It took years of experimenting and breaking the rules in the studio to figure out that there could be things that really worked. Once things started to work, I really had to take note of them because I was essentially doing things that weren't supposed to be done with paint and material, and it was resulting in really cool things that I liked. So in order to be able to do them again, I had to start an art journal. Downpipe gray mixed 4:1 with rock candy gray and red earth. All mixtures in cups poured at 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. The AC on 45 minutes. They were tilted and manipulated 2 hours later at 10:30. Result, perfect ripples. That was a good one. Sanded 3 hours later. Sprayed with poison and butter 12 hours later. The temperature and the humidity in the room changes everything, so I need to make sure I document the temperature, the humidity, time of day. At 10:30, it was tilted, dried for 12 hours. Layer 4 was added the next day at 5 p.m. Dried for 12 hours, 39% humidity, then sprayed. Result, crackling. I realized that every color wanted to react in a different way to each element, whether it was wind or water or gravity. I can only get certain effects from certain colors. So the teal spray paint that I used mixed with the light peach paint mixed with a little water, I know now is going to give me this ripping apart effect because the oil mixed with the water and the enamel paint has that type of reaction. And if I hit it with wind and gravity at a certain point, it's going to give me something different. So if I want to add droops and ripples and more of a sculptural effect, I can do that at a certain point in the dry period. This piece makes me feel both calm and anxious. I mean, the cracks inevitably give me like a sense of anxiety and fracture, but the coolness of the gray is very calming. I mean, and that's what the surface of earth does, which is soothing and cracking and ripping apart all at the same time. I find inspiration from moving my body with the paint. I love being an active painter. That's why I put the paintbrushes away at a certain point in my practice, is because I wanted to use my body to create the artwork rather than the paintbrush to create my artwork. So that's when I started to really pour paint in large quantities. It's in moving around the canvas with my body, with the paint, that gets me super excited every time I'm in the studio. I like to keep the drips that come off of the paintings because I can rip them off of the plastic and then reincorporate them into other works of art. This is enamel paint that I've poured on enamel and polymer. I've poured on a piece of plastic that I can then rip off and kind of use sculpturally, like this, in other art forms. And I can reincorporate things like this into paintings to give me more sculptural-like effects. This piece is getting into my liminal series, which is really about freezing moments of time in the transition from one phase to the next. When this piece is about halfway dry, I'll manipulate it in such a way where the ripples will dry. So it's basically freezing that moment in time. It's called the liminal series because liminal means anthropologically that you are in a moment of transition. You are neither here nor there. And so that's how I felt in pregnancy, and that's what I wanted to accomplish in my paintings. This piece took me over 3 years to create, actually. So you can see through the layers the amount of time that it took me to do, because each one of the layers took weeks, if not months, to dry, and then I needed to live with it for long periods of time because it's a large scale piece. So this really reflects some of the first layers that I put on the canvas with enamel, spray paint, gesso, water, manipulated with large swaths of wind. And it really covered the whole canvas. And from there, I went into layering with really thick pours of enamel and medium. And I did that layer by layer, interspersed with thin layers, and then I would hand sand those down. So some of these thicker moments that you see with the ripples took about 3 months to dry, which is why the piece took me 3 years. And this piece is called Earth Body. So combining different colors is an interesting way for people to have their own inner conversation with the painting. Colors hold memories for people. I just want people to be present when they view my art. Everybody is going to have a different memory, a different story when they are looking at art, and presence is hard to come by these days, so that's what I want them to experience, is presence. I'm always experimenting in the studio. That's what's most fun for me. I'm experimenting with new materials, paint, elements. I'm working on the liminal series now, but who knows, I could be working on a new series and not even know it.
So that kind of started my process of studying color on a daily basis. And once I got that process down, I was able to expand my alchemical techniques on top of it. I started experimenting with spray paint, gesso, acrylic, adding polymers and gels to things, and kind of just turning the studio into a science lab. I had a lot of things that went wrong. I had a lot of happy accidents. I would come into the studio the next day after having like tilted a painting a little bit too much, and it would have fallen over onto itself and exposed the layer behind it. But that only happened if like the layer behind it was a gloss coat and not an eggshell coat. So all of these very intricate details seemed to matter. I would test every color and every sheen, so eggshell, flat, semi-gloss, gloss, and I would also test all the different brands from Behr to Sherwin-Williams. Every single one of them did something different. And because of that, I had to start writing everything down. I was in New York City at the time, so temperature and humidity played a huge role into also what these colors did. So I really started to take note of everything from time, temperature, when the color was poured, when it was manipulated, when did I tilt it, did I hit it with wind or heat, was it by the window? I noticed that all of these little things had an effect on the way the paint moved and the textural effects and the final composition of my paintings. And it became a really fun process because it was almost a little full circle, and watching my dad look through his microscope, make his notes about all of the different things that he saw in his office every day. These are just some more pictures of the studies of color I do. You can see that where it's very subtle, but some of the peaches, they don't give me ripples, where others give me these beautiful ripples and dimples and flow marks. And so while it's very subtle, it's very important to sit there and notice what kind of textural details these colors have, because through one color, I'm getting highlights and shadows and textural effects, which I find really interesting. I soon started sculpting some of these paintings. I would pour the latex paint, sometimes with a polymer, sometimes with a thickener from Guerra, onto plastic sheeting. I would let them cure over a series of days, and I would peel them off. I only came to learn this because a lot of my paintings would drip onto the floor, and sometimes I would have plastic on the floor, and I started to notice they would peel off on their own after a certain amount of days. So then I started doing that myself onto plastic sheeting. Through the open studios in New York, I did catch the eye of my first gallery who wanted to show the color studies, and that's Muriel Gapon. She really gave me the courage to continue experimenting with color. So I'm eternally grateful for her for just giving me, I guess, the nod to be like, continue experimenting, because it's in the simplicity of your experiments with color that is giving her feelings of something. From there, I was sponsored by Farrow and Ball, which was a very interesting sponsorship because Farrow and Ball paints are so high quality and the pigment is so wonderful, they actually did not do the things I wanted them to do. They did what paint should do, which is lie flat and not give me a whole lot of textural effects. So I actually had to really dig deep into adding binders and polymers and really dial down on when I was manipulating these things and enhance the manipulation effects in order to get the textures I want. What was so cool about this is I really took my color journal, which looks a little bit like a chemistry chart, and put it on the wall. So you'll see I made notes on the wall of the color mixtures. I make notes like this on all of my journals. You may not be able to understand what they are, but I kind of do. It's the name of the paint, if I added white, if I added it twice or 3 times. I make these symbols, which means I did it during the day or night, or if it was above 70 degrees or under 70 degrees. So all of these things mattered, and I had a little key at the bottom. So this was my first real installation into showing how each color does something different. And this installation was ultimately acquired by a museum in China. This show was at Pen and Brush in New York City, which is a wonderful organization that is supporting women in the arts and has been for over 100 years. And so they really helped me lean into my alchemical techniques as well and this layering process that I was digging into. They also wanted to show a lot of the art that was incorporating these new spray paint reticulation effects that I was doing, where I was layering, in addition to the latex paint, these thin layers of spray paint and water, and kind of creating these pools, these mountainous valleys with the latex and these calming pools of spray paint, acrylic paint, and gels. These are some of the art where I really dug into the spray paint reticulation. These were actually done in the winter. So you can see that the cool air really cracked the paint and almost created iceberg-like effects on the latex paint. This is not a technique that I can really get in Florida because of our humidity level. The humidity in Florida gives me much more luscious ripples, whereas the winter in New York would give me some really nice, effective cracking techniques. It's almost like a little anxiety-inducing, which is very New York City. I then started to pair these up with meditation studies, because before I do any large work, I actually pair the colors together to make sure they're going to work on a larger scale. So I first test the color to see what the textural effect the color will give me. I pair them together to make sure the colors are going to work, and then I do them on a larger scale. This is me kind of dialing into macro micro forms of earth, but also my composition is now shifting. I'm creating these negative spaces around my art, which I hadn't done before. And I'm also starting to capture the creation process with my camera from an aerial perspective. So this is just a process video I shoot on my iPhone. I was doing it for every large piece. I'm still trying to do it. But because I'm so inspired by aerial images of Earth, I said, let me try and capture the aerial image of me creating these pieces. It's also capturing what I love most, which is the process. And this started to really shift my perspective. It also started to get me into video work and also seeing the paintings move and come alive. I always kind of saw them alive in my mind, but in watching the video of me creating the painting, I really started to see it come alive. And shortly after that, my forms started to change. I started to create more forms with negative space so I could see them move, almost like they were microbial beings or macro perspectives of Earth. I started to want a lot more negative space, so these textural moments could be highlighted because I could really start to see them move and come alive in my mind's eye, and I wasn't sure where that was going until NFTs really came to the forefront. Because I was from Wired Magazine, a lot of my former colleagues were in the tech world still. And so I always had my eye on the NFT market, even though I wasn't totally sold on it. But it was during the pandemic, we were all in lockdown. I really delved into it and I started to think it was quite exciting. And I said, why not, follow the fun of it and go down this road. And it wasn't until I made this painting here, it's called Levitation, where I really saw my first NFT. I said, this reminds me of clouds moving in the sky, and I know exactly what I want to do for my first NFT. So I really dug in. I got on Twitter. I did all of the things that apparently you need to do to get into this NFT space, and I found somebody to animate my first NFT. And this is my first NFT. So I hired an animator to essentially animate a painting exactly how I wanted it. I wanted my first NFT to be very meditative. It was a time where there was so much chaos in the world and in the digital space. I really wanted my first NFT to be a break from that. I wanted you to be able to relax while you watched this NFT, which is, well, it's called Mindscapes. And I started to really dig in. So I took a Crypto for Creatives course at Locust Projects in Miami by Tam Grin. This was in February of 2022. And it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. I find that I had started to, in my paintings, kind of limit my curiosity and my inspiration for what was possible. I think sometimes we are limited by the size of our canvas. I'm working on a 48 by 60 canvas. Like, what cool thing could fit into the confines of this? But NFTs made me think beyond that. For some reason, I always thought thinking beyond that would be sculpturally, but it happened to be in NFTs. So I ended up researching, and through the course at Locust Projects, they really helped me understand the landscape. She had me get on Twitter again. There's so many different marketplaces where you could host your NFT. You can have it on the Ethereum. You could have it on, there's all sorts of different cryptocurrencies. What was most important to me was the visual aesthetic and ease of use. I found that through foundation.app. It's called With Foundation. And they're a marketplace that is for artists. You actually, when I was on it, had to be invited by an artist in order to showcase your art on there. So there was a little bit of a gate. And I felt like the NFTs were of a higher quality on this marketplace, more so than OpenSea, which is, you can go on OpenSea, and it was very confusing. It still is very confusing. And the whole NFT marketplace is very volatile. It's very confusing. It has its ups and downs. It has its glitches. But with all of that, I still found it to be very fun and very intriguing. And there was a lot of excitement behind it, especially for women's equity, building up women. It was a completely new community. So we were now not working with the traditional players of the art market. This was a completely new community of people that were excited about art, that were excited about digital art, video art, had cryptocurrency to buy this art. And I found it to be very, very exciting. But more exciting than that, through 6 months of like absolute confusion of trying to figure this out, it started to really shift my perspective of my physical paintings. And that's why I really wanted to continue doing it. This is a second NFT. My first series, Mindscapes, it included 5 NFTs. Each NFT was color coordinated to the time it was minted. So this is 4:44 a.m. And each one does something a little bit differently. So the background color basically shifts with the color of the sky, and the clouds move each a little bit differently. And it was super fun to creatively think about my art in a new way. This caught the eye of Jessica Ransom at the Palm Beach Cultural Council, who was doing a show on acquisitions, large and small. And at this time, I was also selling art on Foundation through Ethereum. So she allowed me to showcase my meditation studies, one of my larger pieces with the new alchemical techniques of spray paint, and then 3 pieces that were also created as NFTs. What I decided to do, because it's still a little confusing on how to sell physical art as an NFT, I decided to sell the physical painting through Ethereum. So if you purchased this NFT, you also got the physical painting. A lot of times, people in the community, if you were to purchase this NFT, would want you to burn the art. That wasn't something that I wanted to do. I think as of now, I would do it a little bit differently. I wouldn't do it this way again. I would create a completely different version of my physical painting that did not almost coordinate so well with the actual physical painting. But this was a series called Energy Patterns. Again, I just wanted to dig into the movement of texture of my art through digital animation. This led to an upcoming project, which I'm super excited about. And it's an animated painting with sculptural forms at the Mandel Public Library. What's so cool about this is I always thought that me thinking outside of the box and experimenting would be from painting to sculpture. But it was really from painting to NFTs that got me to sculpted paintings. It's because when I saw my paintings move within the digital animation world that I started to see how they could come to life as sculptures. So I'll be creating a digital animation with an awesome 3D artist out of the Netherlands. His name is Roy Veldkamp, who's helping me 3D wrap my artworks into these forms on these animated paintings, and then I'll be creating sculptural forms around it. 3D is a little bit of a new world for me. The way he explained it was almost like wrapping a gift. So I had to create an excess amount of paint on both sides for him to wrap around the form. I'm going to show you right now the composition that we'll be going for. It's a low-res version. But basically what he's doing on the right, you'll see the clouds moving. He's using an algorithm of clouds that are from an aerial perspective. And what he is doing is he's reflecting my artwork through the clouds and 3D wrapping it around the form. So that'll be a 90-second video of my artwork reflected in the clouds through 3D mapping and an algorithm of overview effect of clouds with sculptural forms around it. The colors are going to change. I'll have some reflective material on the back of the clouds. And it's really kind of a 360 opportunity for me to showcase some of the experiments I'm doing in the NFT world with these new sculptures that I am now totally in love with, and my traditional method of painting with latex and spray paint. This also started to help me think outside the box. I can't believe what a limit I have put on my brain for some reason that NFTs help me break out of. Just seeing my art move in a different form helped completely blow my mind open to playing with material again. I didn't have to be so serious about it. I had been experimenting all my life, but for some reason put myself in a little bit of a box and doing my process-based work on these, traditional sized canvases. So working with NFTs really helped me think through how to sculpt my paintings even further. I co-curated a show with Dana Donati on the color pink, and this was the installation that I did where the paint was literally dripping and spilling off of the surface onto this cool reflective pool of pink material and paint. So through incorporating the tool of NFTs and technology, the biggest plus is that it has helped expand my mind on what is possible in my physical art. I wanted to also show you something cool I've been playing with, and that's artificial intelligence through DALL-E. What I've been using it for is, again, inspiration to help me think outside the box. I now have a lot of ideas for things that I want to do with sculptures in the public forum, and so I've been kind of automatic writing into DALL-E to see what the artificial intelligence will spit out. This is a picture of pink reflective sculptures melting in the middle of the jungle. And I just absolutely love these random reflective images that it spit out for me. These are some other concepts that I plugged in. Reflective sculpture on the beach and pink painting melting in a high-end gallery. I mean, just some of the little details that AI is giving me with, the horses leaning against the wall, like the painting literally dripped onto the floor. It's just absolutely fascinating and just a constant reminder to try out these new techniques. I may not be experimenting now with alchemical techniques in the studio, and I'm incorporating technology to experiment, but it's helping further my physical process. And it's just another tool in the toolbox to grow my practice, because I find that If I'm not experimenting, if I'm not playing, if I'm not working with process-based materials, then it lacks a little bit of the fun and the flow state. The last image I'm going to show you is a pretty fun one. This is what Dolly thinks of me painting in my studio in New York City, sculpting a pink drippy painting. So I think that's absolutely hilarious. And I think everybody should go on Dolly after this and type out their perception of themselves in the studio and see what Dolly has to say about it. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
That's it. I think you left us at the beginning of a whole new exploration. Dolly is a completely new world for me. And I think all of us are coming into this technological world at some point in different stages, and we're all feeling our way in. Thank you. This has been the most wonderful introduction to a lot of complicated thoughts that we're all going to be experimenting in different ways in different times, and exploring. Just fascinating. You very much are a scientist.
Well, my dad has definitely influenced me, even though he doesn't think he did and was working all the time. Going to his office every day and just seeing him behind a microscope, working with the animals, making his notes. I mean, it was definitely inspirational and super fun. He was always having fun with it. So I think that helped.
Parents have effects in ways that are so hard to measure, but this is just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, thank you. I've got questions in every direction. I'm going to say good night. Come back next month. Lauren Shapiro from Miami will be speaking.
Oh,
And you'll be hearing more about that very soon. Bye.
bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.